A little bit. All right, everybody. It is currently March 24th, 2018. This is Disclaimers by Ed Johnston. Uh, well, there's not much to say other than Ed. Why don't you tell them what you're going to be talking about?
Well, I want to get into a couple articles tonight that happened with Wesley Dick. I want to bring that forward. But first, I'd like to say to thank everybody for joining us tonight and those who will come following and listening to us later. This is for education purposes, and so the thing is, they wrote it, we quote it. So that's the bottom line when it comes down to it. Because if we don't sit there and defend our rights and our families and our neighbors, we ain't going to have nothing. And people got to realize that this is reality. This ain't just some, conspiracy spirits or theories or whatever you want to call them, because we deal with reality. We have to deal with reality. Because reality is what we live. That is the one point that people got to comprehend. So when you are kidnapped and held for ransom and you write your affidavit, don't forget 18 U.S.C. Code 1201 kidnapping. Because it does follow under that, and we do put up the information on kidnapping by federal law. Even when public servants kidnap you, it is a crime. But you have to file on the crime. Everybody goes, well, I need to wait for a district attorney or a state attorney general. I need somebody in the police department that's supposed to file crimes. Folks, that is not exactly true. You are to file your paperwork in the criminal charges. If you want to do that, you have to do an affidavit and preferably do it a steel, so that way it's Gerard certified, and you want to make sure that you hang it publicly on their bulletin boards. Make sure the media has it. And that structure. That's what Guashu did. That was right. Hopefully he was supposed to join us tonight, and that's the one thing that I was trying to get him to join us because I wanted him to bring his side of the story of a lot of things that he had accomplished, because he just accomplished another thing where they tried to put him in jail, and so they tried to put him in jail again, waiting for him to comply. That was the one thing. They wanted him to sit there and give up his rights, and he's native, and he's proven this fact. And that's the one thing that is so frustrating, because there's a newspaper that I posted around that I put out for the night talk show. It's called the Gazette Journal. It's out of Nevada. And Paiute man cleared in plant gathering case. So he goes out and gathers plants and deer and elk and food. And he's been through this more than once. I've been dealing with him for several years, and or we've been having conversations for several years, and that was the whole thing about the education we are given to one another. And so when he gets cleared of these things, the court system does not like it when they do this and they go after him. Right now he's got a court filing in federal court. They've been trying to dismiss it. I'm trying to get him to comprehend, quit filing it in the wrong court. And that's the one thing that people don't realize. With an Article 1 court, it's legislative, it's administrative. It's a tribunal court, and you don't have rights. And people go, well, I could go in and use my Magna Carta in this court. Well, the Magna Carta is English in Britain, and you can use it in Article 1 court, but it doesn't matter because most of the time they're not going to adhere to it. So you have to realize what they are doing compared to what you think they are doing. And that is the frustration we are majorly living with today. Because people do not comprehend what's really going on in our communities. They don't pay attention to what's going on in our states. They don't pay attention to what's going on in our neighborhoods. I mean, realistically, how many people you know in your neighborhood that you honestly know? How many people in your neighborhood do you have contact with? And that is the one point that we don't discuss amongst each other. We used to explain these things to one another. That was a long time ago. And we don't have people doing that today. And so that's what we're trying to do, is get the knowledge out there, so this way you know what the Article 1 and Article 3 courts are. And also, too, New Hampshire had a case that clearly stated that the sheriffs have no authority. They're corporation members. And that is the one thing that you have to realize, that these are corporation members. They go by a corporate contract. They don't go by the Constitution, because their job instructions are not to go by the Constitution unless you force them to go by their administrative rules that says that they have to protect and serve. And people go, well, they're not out there protecting and serving like what they say they're supposed to do in the contracts or the country. And that is the one point that people have got to start waking up and quit living in this fantasy world of what's going on. Because people sit there and they live in fantasy, a lot of things that are going on around them. They don't realize what's going on around them. They don't live in reality. Everybody wants to use an excuse so that way they don't have to get involved. And that is the saddest part. It's like when I was kidnapped and held for ransom, my neighbor sat there and said, well, you should have never been kidnapped. You should have never been held for ransom. And I said, okay, that's good. Write an affidavit, support me. And he's like, oh, no, I can't do that. I own a business. I can't get involved because then they attack me in my business. And so that is the one thing that you have to start comprehending these points, the way people work in your community. Because they do make deals with the police department. They do make contracts with them. And so I am just so disturbed that people don't have no respect for the elderly and disabled. And people say, oh, yes, we do, yes, we do, yes, we do. Well, prove it. That's where I get on my kick on religion, because everybody talks religion, but nobody produces religion. They don't want to tell you the truth. And so when we go through these points of view, like with an Article 1 court that's administrative court that only works for the corporation. And what's one thing when you start realizing that the corporation members are not there for you. They are there for their own personal financial gain. And these men and women know what they're doing. They know it because they are actually trained in the circumstances of not standing up for your rights. They're actually educated and trained to do this, to make money off you. And so that is the one thing Title 18-411 says, that money, you can't pay debt with debt. So when they force you into these court systems and tell you that you have to pay this, that, and the other thing, you have to definitely ask them to prove it in writing and have it certified. You want to have these things certified, because if they're not certified, how are you supposed to know that you are owing what they're trying to claim that you own or owe? And they do go after your personal property and assets. You know, that is the one thing that people have got to realize. That's how they make their living. You know, that's how they make their circumstances. Without that circumstances, how do you know what's really going on around them? And so we've got a lot of people that I've been paying attention to that have been winning in court lately, and they've been putting their instruments in, asking for certification, asking for the debt, asking them to prove their jurisdiction. And that is the one point that once we can get more and more people that are starting to stand together on this, that is the point. Once we get more and more people standing together instead of arguing, because we got a lot of people out there who do other talk shows, and I've been on many of them. I've been on a couple this week. And this is the one thing that is interesting when you watch these people trying to tell people or suggest to people, because a lot of people tell people what to do, and we're supposed to be adults. We're supposed to not tell anybody what to do. We're supposed to have respect for one another. That's an interesting concept. But see, if we don't have respect for one another, how are we supposed to win our court cases? How are we supposed to survive in society, as people call it? And see, I don't like the word society because that's an English word. I don't support the British. I don't believe in supporting the British because our preamble of our Constitution says we're not supposed to have anything to do with them. But then people want to go sit there and they think this thing with the Queen is such a big deal, or the Roman Catholic Church is such a big deal, when they're the ones who are raping, robbing, and pillaging your children for personal financial gain. And that's the whole point. It is personal and financial gain. Because they don't care about you when it really comes down to it. I don't care if it's your mommy, your daddy, your brother or sister who works for the system. They don't care about you. And I've seen that happen in many families, where families will turn on their own family members and go against them. And that's the one thing that, with the Article I courts being territorial tribunal courts, you have to realize what they're talking about when it comes down to these things. If you don't comprehend these things that they're talking about, and you don't comprehend what the courts are doing to you, that is the saddest part, because we're supposed to be working with one another to educate one another. And without educating one another, what future do your children have? That is the one thing that you have to start putting these things together on the future of your children, your bloodline. Because remember, it is your bloodline that has the effect on this. And if you don't stand up for your bloodline, who else is going to stand up for your bloodline? That is the one thing that people need to pay attention to, their bloodline. And people say, well, Ed, and I've had this happen many times and even on talk shows. Well, Ed, how do you prove that you're lawful or legal? I've been on phones with other people on this the last week. And it's like, can you prove your generation before basically the 14th Amendment was passed or administratively passed, not unanimously passed. It was passed administratively. And that's where people have got to comprehend what the Constitution means versus administrative law. The administrative law dictates on how you are going to live. And if you don't comprehend how you are to live, that is the problem that you have to deal with yourself on these things. Comprehend what your responsibilities are. See, that's the one thing that most people don't realize about taking personal responsibility, because most of us were not raised in that fashion to take personal responsibility. Some of us were raised that way. Some of us were not. And so that is the one thing that is bringing these points over to the facts of what the reality of what we're standing up for. That is the one point that bringing these truths in. Because if we don't bring the truth in of what's going on to our friends and our neighbors, or what's going on with the truth with the local elected and public officials in your community, this is the one thing you have to realize, that your public is billing off of your straw man account. And these men and women know this stuff. And they are trained and told to lie. And people will say, well, I don't lie. Why should they lie? Well, you're not part of their structure. You're not part of their devil's way of looking at things. Because everybody wants to talk about the devil or God and all this stuff. Well, the point is, how do we know what's real until we see it, prove it, We could have faith in ourselves. We could have faith in the things around us. But that is the one thing that we have to have faith in. Faith. And if we don't have responsibility and comprehension of faith, then what is the point of the rest of it going on? See, this is the one thing that is very frustrating for all of us that have been involved in these things. Been involved in a lot of people's court cases, even some involved to a point in personal life, walking them through things, opening their eyes up. And that is the one thing that doing this is one of the best things about it, because you can see what the truth is with people compared to what people think is going on around them. It's like there's one guy that went through a traveling issue and beside Kwashu, but there's another guy who's going through that one right now. And he's been through it before. He's already won 2 court cases on it, and they're trying to run him through again. So now it's trying to get him to comprehend to file the lawsuit against them. You know. Anyhow, this is the one thing to bring up to these points. To bring up these points to protect your bloodline, your home, your children. Because I'm putting out a whole bunch of information right now that I'm going after the locals to prove on property taxes. Because I've been fighting them for years. Nobody has proven anything of my request. I keep proving that this is the one thing that people don't get this point. People don't get that you have a right. Even if you're an immigrant, you have a right to a point. And that's the one thing that people have to realize, that everybody goes, well, the immigrants don't have rights. Technically, they don't. They are from a foreign corporation, another country. They're not part of your bloodline, my bloodline, our bloodline. So this is the one thing that most people don't get what bloodline means. And I've argued, like I said, with many people on it. And so it is the one thing that to bring up the corporation structure is knowing how to ask the questions to your elected and public servants, knowing the response to your elected and public servants, knowing how to comprehend what they are trying to tell you, and learn how to read between the lines when they talk to you. Use your mind. Because once you start using your mind in these assets, and I mean assets because it's your ass on the asset line, that you have to sit there and know how to defend yourself, defend those around you, and mainly protect the bloodline. So when a male and female mate, we'll call it that way, when they mate, isn't it a fact that it takes bloodline to mate? Doesn't matter if you're native or foreign or whatever, but it takes a bloodline, because when you have children, it becomes a bloodline. That is the one thing that is the whole point of these things, called the bloodline. And so that way you own your bloodline. And I've asked people that are going through this with DHS, and I said, have you filed and own your bloodline? And they're going, well, we didn't think that was necessary because we have this evidence. And I'm going, what's your evidence? We're going by a birth certificate. And they said, oh, so you're using their evidence to allegedly protect you when their evidence is to protect them. So please comprehend what you're doing by what you're saying on that, because you're not filing ownership of your child, of your bloodline, of your circumstances of life. And that is the one thing that you need to know what it is to file to own your property. And it's like the one thing in the state of Oregon, when you have a modular manufactured mobile home, I'm going to pull up the law here in a minute, so you're not supposed to register your personal property. And I'm going to get into that one here in a second, but you're not supposed to register your personal property, and these men and women know this stuff, but they don't care about it. They want your money. That's all they care about. And once you start comprehending that these foreign agents, and that's the one thing, that these foreign agents have to be registered, and I was glad to see that Comey is being indicted for not registering on the 1938 Foreign Registration Agent Act. And I would like to see more of these elected and public officials doing this, but it takes people, we the people, to file these charges that they haven't filed. And I bring this up to people, to their attention, but like in Oregon Statute 446578, manufacturer structures are not required. Ownership documents are recorded in the county of deed records. So a lot of people are being charged property taxes on their modular mobile home when it's not supposed to be registered. The only one that pays registration or license on a manufacturer by the law 561 is the state. The state is a corporation, so if they have those manufacturer homes like with the schools and stuff like that, they're supposed to pay that registration. But technically, a lot of them don't pay the tax. What they do is at the end of the year, they're a 501c3, so they write it off on their taxes or on their structure. So the 501c3 or not through 9 could write off a lot of things, and even if they write off so much, they could actually get a reimbursement check from the Secretary of State. And that's where people do not comprehend how this is a fact. Because your manufacturer structure has an identification number that when it does that, it is to get you. It's called the manufacturer state of origin, basically a birth certificate. And so you want to make sure that you get that in your possession each and every time that it transfers. And to make sure that you don't have a responsibility to your elected and public servants. Because your elected and public servants have a responsibility to you. And that is the one thing that you have to realize, these points of fact. That when you sit there and register your assets and your property with the state, you're giving control and ownership of that assets and property to the state. And this is how these men and women get this. This is like with, hopefully I was waiting for Kwashu to come on because I wanted him to bring up that case he just went through. But this is the one thing that he's been filing and bringing these things up because he's native born. He's not a born citizen or national. And a born citizen, and this is where people don't get it. Well, if you're born on the soil, you have rights. No, you don't. Federal law and the Constitution has already declared those things, that you have no responsibility or liability and have no Constitution rights until you are the 5th generation in this country. And that has been proven in the superior courts. And we've brought the superior courts filings forward and brought them up. And I know, because Kawashu's been using several of them. And he's getting it slowly. We've had to work with him me and Dave worked with him for a long time to bring him up on things. And he's slowly getting it and starting to file the criminal charges. And you should know in the state of Oregon, I don't have the rest of the states, but ORS 180.222, powers and duties, Department of Justice. So the Department of Justice shall have supervision on all civil actions, legal processes within the state of Oregon, may be a party or may be interest. But when the state of Oregon is using this power that they're claiming under administrative rules, you have to file that they don't have power. And here's the other point in this, Structure 2 under this. No state officer, board, commissioner, or the head of any department or institution of the state shall employ or be representative by any other counsel or attorney at law. So when these public officials go into court They cannot be represented by a public defender. They cannot be represented by an attorney, basic counsel, because they're a corporation of we the people, so they have to represent themselves. And once people start comprehending that your public servants cannot hire lawyers, attorneys, counsel, because they have to stand there by themselves. They have to represent themselves. They have to bring that evidence forward and prove. And that's why I'm going to get into the one thing is I did call New Hampshire, and I did get the New Hampshire court case that clearly states that the Sheriff's Department are a corporation and they have no arresting authorities. They can't arrest, they can't put you in prison, they can't do the stuff that people are going through today with the sheriffs there, but you have to file with your Sheriff's Department to let them know, here's the court case, prove it. Or if you could go in the clerk, get it certified. That is the one thing that you really want to do is get your stuff certified. Once you get your stuff certified, then all of a sudden you have an argument that they're not going to go against, because if they go against that argument, they mandatory lose and prove fraud. And these men and women know this stuff. They are actually taught this stuff. They are truly taught this stuff. And this is where people have got to start working with one another, like a lot of us are really starting to do, improving these points back and forth, showing these points of truth. Because these points of truth are what wins your court cases. Preferably, and a lot of people always get into this point, I want my day in court. Well, don't sit there and put yourself in a position to walk into the devil's game. Because you're not there to go into the devil's game. You are sitting there to comprehend how to win without going into the devil's game. You want to go in and win your court case. You don't want to sit there and fight and argue with them. That's why when we produce, not only we, but a lot of other men and women on the internet have been producing evidence too on these things. But you want to be able to bring these evidence forward. You want to produce the facts on these things. And if you don't produce the facts, who else is going to produce the facts? Nobody. Their side ain't going to bring evidence forward to protect you or to help you. Their job is to take money from you. That's their whole position, is to take income from you. And that's all they care about. And I know I always repeat myself on this, but I try to get it drilled into people's head that they've got to quit living sometimes a fantasy world of life where they think life is supposed to be this way. People are supposed to act this way. They're supposed to represent us this way. They're supposed to take care of us this way. Who is supposed to take care of us this way unless we do it ourselves? That is the major part that people have got to start comprehending, how to defend themselves, how to fight for themselves. And so that is the one thing is that people don't get this point. I mean, I talk to people and I get messages all the time. Yeah, we know it's tribunal, and we know this, and then it's like when they write their court case up, they stay in the tribunal structure. Instead of forcing them to prove their rights, instead of forcing these men and women, and like I said, you can sit there and tell these men and women that you don't have to be a participant. You don't have to be a participant in these things. But it's up to you to make sure that you do not become a participant. And I do stress this out to people all the time because, see, we get a lot more immigration that always tries to move in the state or the states, I should say, the 48 states, from other countries. And they get men and women wrapped up and fighting and arguing each other. And so you don't want to sit out there and do this. And see, the one thing that that was the main thing with Quashu, he keeps bringing up these court cases. He keeps going through these things. He keeps winning them. They keep dragging him back into court. And they want him to start, complying with his structure, with their structure. And he ain't going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to comply with these people. I want them to prove it. That's the one thing I have been asking them to prove their circumstances time and time again. So I have come to the conclusion the only way that these things can happen is to force them into an Article 3 court. Now, I'm still serving evidence on them. By far, I'm still serving lots of evidence on them. And I got more that I'm going to be putting out here shortly because I've been working on some of these things. I want to make sure when I do put these things out, it's not intentionally set up to bite me in the butt. I want it to bite them in the butt. So it's knowing to, when you put these things out, the liability that you are taking. And that is the one thing, if people go, well, Indians are the only ones who are native. No, that is not true. Indians are not the only ones here in the 48 states. Because these have been proven that other bloodlines have been in this country going back to the 14th century, 15th century, 16th century. So that is the one thing that you have to realize, that these things do exist. So when they exist, quit fighting them, educate yourself, and get the strength to start going after them. Because once we start going after them, collectively, it's like they got the big deal where they're going after their arms nowadays. And they want to go after the arms because, if we get this arm, then that way the government can walk into your home and take your assets. People say, they wouldn't do that. People, you got to wake up what's happened in Australia, New Zealand, all these countries that were stripped of their rights. Once you realize that what these countries are, and I've contacted and had contact with some of these men and women, and that is the one thing for foreign countries, foreign police officers, and they know it. They know what's going on, but they can't speak up because it's their job. They like to have employment just like most people do, so they're not going to go after and destroy their employment. And that is the one thing that we have right now today, what's going on with people, because people get paranoid with their employment or their job, or whatever's going on in their personal life. But you cannot sit there and lose reality of what's really going on in your life. And how are you handling your life? Who's protecting who? See, this is the one thing that once you start protecting yourself and your family bloodline, you're going to start winning. You'll start seeing how these people do it, because some of these people have respect for that because of their bloodline. Some of them just don't even give a title. But, that's the one thing you cannot deal with, these men and women who just don't care about what's going on around them. And there's a lot of us that have dealt with these type of people on Facebook. A lot of people we've dealt with, helping them out, and then they didn't want to follow through in suggestions or read how the circumstances actually work compared to what they're leading to their own mind to believe of what it is, whatever they think. And once you start realizing that you have rights instead of privileges, it's like me. I sat there and wrote a deal and emailed to every senator 2 weeks ago, asking them who owns the children, legislative, executive, or administration branch. Or do we, the people, own the bloodline of our own children? Well, we know we didn't get, so far haven't got a response. So far, these men and women, a lot of these men and women up the Capitol probably do personally know me. And so maybe they're seeing what the outcome is starting to come up because people are realizing what's going on in their communities, in their homes. And you don't have to sign these contracts. Remember, these contracts are voluntary. And they always try to get you into their courtroom, and you don't have to be in their courtroom. That's the one thing, that you don't have to sit there and participate in these courtrooms. And they're going to drag you in, and they're going to try to go after you. Absolutely. That is the one thing, that these men and women know what you are up to. They know what you are doing because we have fiber optics, smart meters, and all those who have phones, cell phones, tracking devices. I won't have one. I always get people said, hey, join me on Messenger or whatever they got on the phones they want you to plug into. I won't do it. I'm not going to put my information out on that type of information on a cell phone. Cell phones ain't like they were 20 years ago, where they actually had protections on the cell phone itself. So they had to go get a warrant to do anything. Now they just sit out in front with a satellite dish in their vehicle and scan the waves. Sort of like what people used to do with the old ham radios. Because the old ham radios, you could go on an FM radio and flip through an FM radio station and know what's going on by what's going on in the FM radio station. And that is the one thing that people don't really realize, that, yeah, it's that simple. You know, but that is the one thing people don't get. It's like the question I got. The ALC says federal court, which one? You know, this is one thing that you have to realize. When the, what is that called? The ALCU, American Civil Liberties Union, only work for the government. They are of the government, from the government, founded by the government of the corporation. And that's the one thing that is just a fact. I've gone after the ALCU. I was even recommended, my case was recommended to them by a high-ranking attorney, that he wouldn't take the case because of his connections at the Capitol. He wouldn't go there. He wouldn't take the opportunity or something like that to go after them because he didn't want to attack them, as he said. And if he attacked them, then he would be losing, you know, his retirement, his structure. And he knew it. And he bluntly told me that in his office. And I'm like, well, where's justice? How come, you know, everybody talks about justice. How come justice doesn't get served? Well, you want, well, you know, the system, we can't do justice. You have to do justice. And that's where a lot of these people are coming to the point, because like I mentioned before, until the mid-1980s and 1990s, prior to that, a clerk in the courts would help you do your paperwork. They knew it. They were educated enough, paralegals, most of them. But some of the people didn't listen to how to do the paperwork. They did the paperwork what they thought they knew. And then they blamed the clerk, and that's why some of the lawsuits happened in the late 80s, mid-80s and late 80s, going after clerks that were helping people who failed, and people running lawsuits, which disturbs me, because you're supposed to be an adult responsible, and you can't blame the clerk if you're getting knowledge from the clerk, because most clerks do not sit there and lead a man or a woman astray. I've been there where the clerks have helped me out before, or walked me through the process of paperwork. And that is the one thing that we do suggest, is read the way the courts work. See, that is the one thing that, you know, that's the one thing that you have to realize, that these men and women do comprehend the court system. And it's an Article I tribunal court. And when you do that, always go to the clerk. When you get a traffic case, I recommend you go to the clerk and ask for a certified copy of the judge's oath. Ask him for a certified copy of the judge's oath. Because once you get a certified copy of the judge's oath, you know if he took the oath to the Constitution or the corporation. Make him stand on which one he did. See, these are the things that we have available to us with the knowledge of making our public employees stand on their employment. Like I read earlier that elected public servants, county commissioners, cops, anything, they can't hire attorneys. And I know people in other states have gone, well, they've done this and they've hired attorneys. And we're going, but when you filed, did you file back on the attorney? Did you ask them to prove their license to practice law? See, there's no such thing as a license to practice law. Of course, they're going to tell you there is such thing as a license to practice law, but there isn't. Nobody has been able to prove it. We know there's no such thing as a license for attorneys. And we know the only thing that they have is a bar card. So you can always ask for their bar card and registration number, because once you get their bar card and registration number, you can go after them on that, because then they're impersonating an officer in court. Well, they're saying they have a bar card. They're an officer of the court. Well, they have to prove that they are licensed to practice law in that court. Because if there's no license, a bar card doesn't mean nothing when it goes to court. Because a bar card just is like it's like having a Costco card. I'm a member, but what privileges or rights do you get with the membership? And these are the things to be bringing into these conversations on who, what, why, and how. And so that is the one thing that we want to bring to your attention, is to sit there and educate you. And that's the one thing that I enjoy with the producer we have. He puts a lot of this stuff scrolling up on the screens on YouTube channel, that people can, when they watch this, they can watch and follow along. Because this is the one thing is about proper education. And it's like people have got to realize that there are two contracts in our Constitution. That happened after the Civil War. One of them is the Vatican's contract, the British government, your Roman Catholic Church, and people don't like it, but it's your Bible structure, that sits there and dictates to you. That is the second Constitution that they say supersedes our Constitution, because religion is supposed to supersede our rights. I don't believe in religion at all. Religion is just mind control to me. I've been through it, been through a lot of church stuff in my younger years growing up, and all I see is people being drugged back in, and ministers telling people to throw themselves on the mercy of the court, even when the pastor knows they are innocent. That's the one thing that disturbs me. He's supposed to be a man of God to stand up for people, and he doesn't. So these things that need to be looked at, which you're doing in your surroundings, they really do need to be looked at. Who is there helping you out? Who is not helping you out? Who is being a burden on the circumstances? And see, these are the things that you have to realize: who's helping you out, who's not a burden, who is the burden, and what are you getting accomplished? And are you getting things accomplished? Because, I mean, I got people that says, well, Ed, you've been working on this for some time. And it's like, well, yeah, I'm like most. I got to learn the actual circumstances of the structure. I have to know what I'm doing and what I'm talking about. And that's what you want to be able to do when you go into these kangaroo court systems, or as Dave will say, these judges who are run by jackasses, these courts run by jackasses. Just another form of animal. And that's the one thing that people got to realize, that these men and women act like animals. And they know it. They know they're not there to protect you. Oh, wait a minute. Technically, they are supposed to be protecting us. That is what the law says. But under Article 1 court, they make more money by not protecting you. They make more money by putting you in their system. And it's all about debt, because that stuff they put you in the system with jails and stuff like that is debt. And that's what I was saying. You can't pay debt with debt. And people have got to realize that these things are paid with a credit debt. They're not paid what you think that is paid by cash or coming in. That's like these courts are 501c3 and 9s. So when you go in and pay a fine, if you're one of those who just goes and does that, make sure you get a W-4 or W-9 form, I mean. Fill out a W-9. Make sure that that gets recorded by the IRS. Because if they don't record that instruments, that is being instruments filed, called debt notes, those men and women are liable. Excuse me. And you have to realize that these men and women are personally liable. They don't have, everybody says, well, the judge has immunity. Judges do not have immunity. The only way a judge has immunity, if you accept the terms of his court without filing immediately back on the court. Say, if you let him have that jurisdiction, that's how his immunity stands. I don't believe in giving men and women jurisdiction over me. I sure wouldn't do that around me to any stranger. Give them responsibility for my actions, my life, and have them dictate to me how I'm going to live. People have been through that. They watched how even family members will even go after people's rights. They put your assets and stuff in my name and we'll protect you. Well, I watched too many families that have gone out and destroyed people for their own gain when people put their assets into their name. That's like the one judge in, I think it was Illinois, that put out a press release, and I had that way back when, to all the police departments that was done inside, told them all to register your land with somebody else's name or somebody else's structure, privatize it, so that way, if you do get sued personally, they can't go after your assets. But that's the one thing is, if you do go after a public servant, you always file a lien on them too. Because if they do have assets, they can't go out and sell those afterwards, or if it's proven, and they were hiding it, and somebody was able to prove it, they're in a big hurry of trouble. They don't have authority and privileges over we the people. When they take that oath of servitude under Title 5 or Title 5 3331 through 3333, they do take a Constitution oath. To the Constitution, most of them, what we have discovered, have taken a constitutional oath to the corporation. So when they take a constitutional oath to the corporation, that's why it's so apparently to have these things certified. They're oath certified, so you know they're standing in what court. So you know that you have their oath certified on how to represent yourself in front of these men and women. And you always can put that oath in the record, too. It doesn't matter if it's an Article 1 oath or an Article 3 oath. But trying to get an Article 3 oath, that's pretty damn hard. But, you know, getting a regular oath that's filed in the county clerk, that's pretty easily. And you want to get those records. You want to be able to have that information so if you ever end up in court, you know, it doesn't matter if you end up in court this week or 10 years down the road and you're in the front of that judge and you have a notarized certification that says that he took this oath, you've got that question right to file the court before you get there. And I do recommend people do file before they go to court instead of just going to court and think you're going to win. Because most people go to court and I'm going to win. I have this. Well, I've watched a lot of people done that and didn't file their paperwork correctly, or, went in and filed it the same way under an Article 1 court. And then when they file under Article 1 court and they wonder why they get in, they lose. Well, that's the point that we're trying to explain to you. Learn your court system. Learn what an Article 1 court system is, an Article 3 court system is. Article 3 is your court system of your Constitution. Article 1 courts are elected and public employees, registered voters, registered church members, and all immigration courts. That was part of the 14th Amendment that set that up. That was part of the tribunal that happened in 1871 with the British Vatican court contract. So, because they had to put in a court system to protect the immigrants from we, the people, or to put them in incarceration for whatever they do to we, the people. So, these court systems have been set up and derived for a lot of major resources to be used, most of it illegally, what they're doing today. Because our court system today is basically a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And don't be fooled, it is an industry. And once you realize that it's an industry, and it is not there to protect you, and you get to start putting the pieces together and knowing when you go into these courts not to be shamed, not to be feared. You got to remember these black robe judges or black robe popes. And if you want to look up the terminology, Black Law Dictionary 5, I believe, that says black robe popes are judges. So these are the one thing to realize how your court system and your religious system work hand to hand, because most violations are based on religion. They're strictly based on religion's point of view. And I don't have nothing with people that believe in religion, but your religion has no place in our government. We the people, the first branch of government. Religion is not part of we the people. Religion came from a foreign country that started dictating us how to live. And once you start comprehending that religion is not part of we the people, and these religious organizations, it's like, I can't believe that they spent millions of dollars of taxpayer funding on Billy Graham's funeral. Just because he was a religious man doesn't give the people rights to pay for his funeral, because he is not, part of, he is part of we the people to a degree, but his whole thing, a lot of it was going after guilt on people. When you make, ask for forgiveness. Forgive those who commit crimes against you. Well, when people get upset when somebody committed a crime against somebody and they decide not just to forgive, and people go, well, that's not Christian, or that's not the way religion works. Well, the thing is religion is an animal of its own structure. That's like your elected and public employees are an animal of their own structure. They write their administrative rules. The other part is so disturbing, like all these ministers that have gone out and assaulted children and they're getting away with it. And that's what sort of shocks me. And then when a man stands up and takes out one of these guys, and then everybody goes, oh, he should have went to court. He shouldn't have done that. Well, I hate to tell you, folks, I like the animal law better than the human law, because the animal law, once the perpetrator is gone, you don't have to look, the child does not have to look over his shoulder again. He knows that fear and that threat is gone. So the fear and threat comes from another angle. It knows that it's going to have a chance to defend itself and not be prosecuted. And that's what we want our court systems to work in a way that protects our bloodline, our children, our family, our assets. That's the whole point that the Constitution put the court system originally intact of our original Constitution, 1776, ratified 1778. It's like the 14th Amendment, we know, wasn't technically ratified. It was done administratively. The 16th Amendment was done administratively, never ratified. And so when we know these points of view like this, of real history, this is what we need to be educating men and women on, instead of telling them that they need religion when their religion should be the Constitution and know how to defend themselves first. Because you could always sit there and ask for forgiveness and prayers and all this stuff. You know, it's like there was one court case I was very familiar with that a young girl got raped. She was a young girl, teenager, and everybody was like, you should forgive the guy. The guy, you know, is trying to ask for forgiveness. She basically wanted to castrate the guy. And I sort of believe in that because I think the rape victim has the right to decide the punishment for the perpetrator. Because if the injured party decided to have some of this stuff, because most men, you know, most of these rape courses, you know, they only go in for a short period of time. Sometimes they get a longer time, but then we got more immigrants that are raping our children. And believe me, in my county, I've dealt with many cases that children are raped, you know, 13, 14, 16, by foreigners, and the court system just lets them go. And then they go, well, you're just going to have a baby, just go on welfare. And then that's how these immigrants come into our country, by rape. And we're supposed to accept it. This is what disturbs me about what Kate Brown and these public servants have been doing in the state of Oregon and other states like California. And hopefully that the people in California are going to follow through on the criminal charges on Jerry Brown. You know, we're still working on the ones here in Oregon on Kate Brown. I haven't heard nothing from the Department of Justice on what I filed. But I noticed that everybody up there at the Capitol has been very quiet. Nobody wants to talk about what's going on. Nobody wants to talk about what's really going on in this state. They don't want you to have rights. They want you to have privileges. And it's like dealing with DMV. You know, this is where I'm getting ready. I'm putting another letter into the House and Senate members asking them on the rights to travel. Dexter Johnson, who's the head of the Legislative Council for the state of Oregon, he knows it. He put out a piece that says the right to travel has to do with commercial. But then his end of his argument was that the final decision belongs to the legislative, or the senators and House of Representatives. Well, it doesn't belong to them. It belongs to we the people. I mean, I'm a subsistence hunter and fisherman. And I've argued that in the state of Oregon for a long time. We know that the state of Oregon now has free fishing days. I do expect to see a total of 30 out the year, free fishing days. And then when it comes up, we're going to be looking at some hunting days. Supposedly they're supposed to be coming up for us. And that is for the lawful Americans. Because we had fish quotas and natural hunting quotas for wild game in this state until the year 2000. And people don't realize it. They don't read the original synopsis. And that was the one thing that I kept a whole bunch of those synopses going back 35 years that got misplaced. Let's just put it that way. And going through these things, and you can produce this stuff for the people to know this stuff. This is what we have to do. This is one thing that I've been trying to get. I wanted Kawashu on this to bring up some points with that tonight, but apparently he's probably out cutting firewood, knowing him, or hunting, because he's been through this many times in Arizona where they gone after him for hunting without a license, traveling without a license, gathering grass and plants without a license. And he goes in and he beats these things. By trying to get him to file the criminal charges on these men and women, He's getting to that point, but I wish he would have done it a couple of years sooner, because it would have stopped dragging some of this on, and it does get drug on. That's the one thing that people got to comprehend, that the court systems love to keep you in the numbers of the court systems. They love to continue your case. And when you go to these kangaroo court cases, you don't want them. You don't want them to sit there and continue your case. You want there to end the case for the day. You didn't want to bring it out for another week, 2 weeks, 2 months. So that way they can figure out how they're going to try to come back at you when you go back in to attack you. And these men and women do that. They spend their days and nights going through how they're going to make money. They really do. They spend their days and nights going how they can make money off our system and off you, off your birth certificate registration, off your registration to your child. The one thing I can happily say, that there are children that are being, you can sort of say, born, but not the legal term, but they're not getting birth certificate and registration. Some of the hospitals are going along with it. Some of the states are panicking because they're going, you can't do this. And they're going, yes, we can prove the law. And all the law that they're able to produce is administrative rules. And that's where you have to file back with them. Well, prove your administrative rules. Certify it. Ask them to prove their position in it. Because they have to prove to you, because they are your servants. And as soon as you get that comprehended, that you have servants, not government. Because I talk to people all the time, oh, the government did this, the government did that. And I'm like, whose government? What government? And that's the one question you need to ask people. What government? Whose government? Bring them to a reality point of who, what, why, and how. Because once they become a point of who, what, why, and how, they can't run. Like I said, I just read you Oregon State Administrative Rule that said that clearly states that elected and public officials have to represent themselves. They cannot be represented by an attorney or a lawyer. And so when you get these court cases, bring this law in when they're going against a public servant. Their law. That's their law, not a constitutional law. But you want to bring these things in so that way you have recognition. That way, if they want to run and hide, and the judge will always say, well, if you don't like my decision, put a motion in. Take me to appeals court. Well, you want to make sure all that's in record for appeals court, and then when you go to appeals court, take them to the appeals court that is supposed to be, oh, I believe that is the Article 3 court. Then they can't run and hide. So you want to make sure that when you go into these court systems, and I hate using the word setting them up, but educating yourself so that way you're not being brought into these court systems under terrorism acts. That's what they're committing, is terrorism. And you can file that even with the Enemy Act. The 1917 Trading with the Enemy Act, because they're trading with the enemy. Citizens and nationals are enemies to this country. Says it right there in the Enemies Act in Executive Order 2040. So if you are a citizen or a national, you are an enemy to we the people. And that's where it was put in place, to protect the bloodline of this country. And people want to argue those things, and it's like, how can you argue when you don't need to argue these things? Anyhow, I'm going to open up the floor. I'm going to open up the floor, see if anybody would like to speak up and bring something in.
All participants are unmuted.
Anybody would like to say something? Okay, at this point. And then this is the other point that people are going after. Some people are finally suing, I guess, under fluoridation in the water system. Fluoride is rat poison, if people didn't know it. That is the main ingredient of rat poison, is fluoride. Fluoride deteriorates your brain cells, so it shrinks your brain down, makes you compliant. And these men and women know that. How we got fluoride out of the water system in my county, we were going to sue the mayor and city council personally for damages to us and the children. So we were going to sue them personally. And they were saying, you can't sue us personally. Yes, you can. Men and women, you can sue these people for violation to your body. Chemtrails, knowing the company who's putting the chemtrails out. That is the one thing you have to realize, that chemtrails are a chemical. And the chemical analyzations have been on Facebook. They've been in a lot of court cases. They're out there by the companies themselves. They have the manufacturer called, I'm trying to remember what it's called. Brain fart, where the chemicals have to be registered and know what the chemicals are in it. And that is our right to know these things. Not a privilege. So once we know our rights, this is where we're going to start getting things accomplished. And we are getting more and more men and women comprehending their rights. And so once you start comprehending your rights and how to file for your rights and not get caught up into it, it's like this order here, Supreme Court of the United States, October term, 1912, ordered. It is now here ordered by the court that rules practices for the courts equally in the United States. This established by the court. Remember, these things have been established and adopted by the court themselves. And the same here, promulgate as such to be forced. On and after February 14, 1913, the Chief Justice says the courts announced adoption of new rules, express the appreciation and interest of subject manifest generally by the judges of the same courts of the United States, and especially by the judges of the certain court appeals courts or reported bar committees for the respective circuits. So each court has a bar committee of lawyers and attorneys that are appointed to that court. That's their overseers, too, of the court. Bar established, and let me get back here. The result, intelligent and careful labors of such committees embodied in the reports which they are made, as with the interest showed by the entire bar and the many individuals suggest that came to court greatly the performance of the duty of the framing of the new rules. The court also desires the record of appreciation of the courtesy shown to Lord Chancellor of England, and replied in writing to certain questions concerning practical operations of English Chandler's rules submitted by him by Mr. Justice Lurton while he was in England for the purpose of observing such operations, November 4th, 1912. So basically, the Supreme Court was saying they were adopting the British court system, Article I court systems, after they passed the 1913 Act that they were getting ready to do. And they knew that this was coming on. They knew this was going to happen. They're not foolish. They're not foolish of all what's going on. And these men and women make sure that they know that you don't know. They don't want you to know their administrative rules. They don't want you to know their structure, what they have to go by. Because if you knew their court rules, their administrative rules, what they have to go by, they could not put you in harm's way. They could not put you in an establishment of a corporation to answer questions, violating your First, your Fourth, and your Fifth, and your Seventh Amendment rights. But it's so apparently that people need to read the Constitution more than they need to read the Bible. Because once you comprehend the Constitution, well, if you're religious, then your Bible comes into place. But until you have a comprehension of your Constitution, how it works, how it applies to you, and how it affects you if you're a lawful bloodline or a legal citizen. And that is, or citizen and national. Let me not forget the national. Because a lot of these people out there going, I'm a national, I'm getting my national ID, I'm getting my national citizenship. And they don't realize what national means. Like we all suggest, do your research. Learn the truth compared to what you think the truth is. Because our system is 180 degrees turned tail than what we've been raised to believe. And once we realize that what we've been raised to believe has been a lie, just like the Tooth Fairy, Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, Halloween, all the satanic holidays, technically those are satanic holidays. And if you don't believe me, do your research. I've put the research up. I've even put it in my court filings. I never had anybody dispute that in the court filings I filed, which I thought was interesting on a couple of things. Even when I brought it up on the House and Senate floor in 2015, I brought up a commentary on that, and nobody wanted to respond to that. They were just saying to me, "Well, thank you for your testimony, Mr. Johnston," but they didn't want to explore the further opportunities. You know, it was like Halloween. You know, everybody goes out and buys junk food, candy, rot the kids' teeth out, teach them how to be. Ruin their bodies before their bodies even start developing. And we do that all the time. People do that all the time with their kids. They give them sugar and sodas. Oh, I mean, and then you wonder why the kid has a fit when it's not getting a soda when it's 6 or 7 years old. Well, you've taught the kid to be addicted to the caffeine and the sugar. And that is the thing that once the kid doesn't have that caffeine and sugar for a while, it forgets it and it doesn't miss it. But these are things that we need to protect their families on, to comprehend that if you do something like that, make it a special treat, or they earned it. I know people that growing up that would make kids earn their soda, or, you know, basically a lot of us went out and we had to go out and earn our clothes, pay for our school books. You know, we didn't have those other types of luxuries that some people had, and I don't consider those luxuries, because I consider those a fact of life. Your knowledge and your education is a facts of life. And so that is the main point, is being patient with yourself when you're learning how to learn. And I've been through that with many people, and it's like, you know, I've had people read stuff, and it's like, don't you comprehend what you read? And they tell me what they thought they read, but their mind turns it around a different way sometimes. And then they try to argue that's not what it says, and it's like, all right, go reread it a couple dozen times, and then tell me what you think after you read it a few times. Take a pen and paper and write it down. If you have to get it through that way in your knowledge for your brain, that you have to write it down for it to comprehend, for you to start thinking about it. Because sometimes it does take people writing it down to go through those type of things. People need to do those type of things, so that way, it depends, because everybody is educated differently or learns differently, puts things together differently. And this is the one thing that when you're doing this stuff and you want to have this stuff, putting it together correctly. And this is the one that you want to make sure that you bring up your court cases. Because the one thing is that we work with our court cases. We work with them doing their structure of knowledge for us. And so when you do go into the county, because I don't like going into county buildings, most county buildings, our county building now have metal detectors in it. So they're already accusing you of a crime before you get in there because you're supposed to walk through a medical detector. People say, well, that's for my protection. Whose protection? Your protection of what? Your fear? Of the boogeyman? Because most people don't do crazy stuff. Sometimes, you figure out of 380 or 400 million people we have in the United States, and we have 1%, maybe 2% of horrifying things that happen. Out of 2%, maybe even, let's say, 10% at the most, but that's speaking way out of the numbers. But, the harm rates and the injury rates and all this stuff. But our court systems could be run better, and it's going to take us, the people, to reroute the court systems for them to do their servitude. It's up to we, the people, to do this stuff. Not to have the court system or these public employees going to do stuff for us. They used to do it all the way up until about the mid-'70s in this country. But then after, when they opened up, mainly when they privatized the Medical Society in '73, and then that became really pungent in 1984, because people mainly didn't get medical debts or anything until 1984. Because they used to be written off and they were part of your income tax, but then they took that money from the income tax and applied it to other areas, or they took the money from one bank account and put it to another account, so robbed from Peter to pay Paul. Like what our corporation, Congress, has done with Social Security. Social Security is a private contract. It's not a government agency if you really do the research. And people say, well, no, it's not. And I've proven it because 1917, in the letter we put out, has the court case that says the Social Security was put in place in its Constitution, protected for we the people of this country, not immigrants. Reading how these court cases read compared to how people would like to interpret them. And that's the one thing, when people want to interpret these things, that's what gets us in trouble. Like, no disrespect for people who read the Bible, but when you start interpreting the Bible, what happens? You get in trouble, don't you? Can't interpret the words of what man wrote. Man wrote the Bible, so that's the other point. Bible was written by man, just like your court systems and your administrative rules are written by man. Written by how much money one could raise. People always get guilt trips when you go to church. Why come you didn't put money in the coffer? Well, why are you people paying to have the churches cover up the salts? Why are people paying the churches to cover up the injuries that they're causing people? It doesn't make sense to me on a lot of things where people do things, or the way they get taught to think. But when you really think about how most people get taught, most people were sat in front of a TV set as a babysitter. And Disney is one of those things that if you actually pay attention to Disney, you'll see a lot of things you will be amazed that you'll see, that you'll be shocked by. And that's the one thing that people have got to start standing up on these things and speak up on these issues. And more people are slowly speaking up, but it's trying to get people how to file these criminal charges on the assault that's happened to people. And a lot of people want to go, oh, I got a lawyer, I got an attorney. And then when it goes to court and they realize they didn't get anything out of it, and their attorney says, well, I didn't have a choice in it because the judge said this or the judge said that. The attorney does have a decision in those things. He is an officer of the court, and when the court is not doing things according to the Constitution or their administrative rules, technically that attorney or lawyer is supposed to speak up, but they don't. Most of the times they don't. Like I had a case that I worked off and on with a individual that was going after their children, and the attorney started standing up for them, and instead of them backing up the attorney, they just let the attorney hang. They didn't back up the statements. They didn't even put in their affidavits to prove the stuff that the attorney was bringing evidence in. The attorney cannot put evidence into a court case. And the individual was told that. And when it went to court, the individual didn't even have his affidavit or her affidavit even prepared. So let the attorney hang, and the attorney was actually trying to do the right thing for once. And so if you do get in a situation where you got an attorney trying to do that, make sure that you put that affidavit and file that affidavit of the injuries. Corpus Electi, Title 18, 3771. See, if you don't use Corpus Electi, you don't have a winning case. And these men and women know it. Not a game. To them, it's like a chess game. To them, it's a game. And you have to realize that these men and women, to them, is a game. Article 1 court or tribunal courts for personal and financial gain of the corporation. That goes into their retirement, their party funds. To their, if they want to go have an outing, they put it off on the taxpayers. They want to have a birthday celebration, you pay for it. And that's the one thing that when they do this stuff, I don't have a major issue with them doing some of these expenditures when it comes out to me, because some of these are like perks that should be available, but so long as they are doing their public service duty, their employment to the people. And when you do have public officials that are honorable, make sure that they know that. Give them a pat on the back. I've got a few that I know that are honorable, who've been straightforward and blunt with me. And so I do give them the credit and the comprehension of what they're doing correctly. But that's what we all need to do, is do these things and let these men and women know that they are doing things correctly. We do appreciate what they're standing up for. When you go to the clerk's office and you get that certified statement from the judge or a public servant like a county commissioner or something, don't forget to always thank them when they do it. Because they know they have a job to do. Most don't cross it. Some do cross it because they know what they're fighting on. Some won't cross the line, and they do their job correctly, and that's what you want, is your job done correctly. You want it filed, and you want it certified. And I've had that drilled into my head, and I want to make sure that others get it drilled in their head, because if you don't have something certified by them, by their system, how are they supposed to react if it goes to court or something when they don't know who to defend who? Either they're defending themselves or they're defending the people. And if you got the certification that says they have to defend you by their own administrative rules that's certified by their corporation, and that's the one thing I will bring up again, is that you want to go to your court systems. Always ask them for a certified copy of their court mission statement. I'm trying to get the ones from my county commissioners right now. I've got to send them another letter back going, hey, I've been asking for this stuff. How come I'm not getting it? Well, they know I'm fighting them on the issue of alleged property taxes. 3 years ago, 2013, 5 years ago, I submitted a deal for them to prove on property taxes. I believe it was 28 pages long to the former governor, and asked them that with the birth certificate, with the stock exchange numbers and everything in the letter. And I never got a response back. And I went out to the state attorney general and everybody, and the House and Senate members. That was actually even brought in and filed with the Oregon State Secretary of State. And so most of my stuff I do when I up at the Capitol, when I get up that way. So I take my stuff in, at least if it ain't certified. If they won't certify, at least I make sure that they file it in record. I want it filed in record. But then we want to make sure that these men and women do their public servitude for we the people. And so when we start standing up, it's like, I've been watching some of these orders that, administrative orders that Trump has been doing to the general public. And the other point that gets to me is like Trump is trying to open up public land for excavation, and that's the one thing that we the people need to be filing affidavits instead of these stupid petitions. We need to be filing affidavits on these people for their employment. So you could do a petition, and that means you're just a whiner. And we're trying to get to the point of comprehending not to be whiners. We're trying to comprehend how to be effective with our elected and public servants. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is by filing on these men and women. And what we are doing, a lot of us are doing it. There are people that are winning their court cases. And then people have won their court cases, and then I know a couple people where they try to reopen their court case and bring them in. That's double jeopardy. And when that happens, you need to file double jeopardy on them. And also, too, file it on them and make sure you file it in they have public employee standards. They have elected and public employee corporation members deals that you can file on them for standards and practices. Lawyers and attorneys have professional standard board of each state has that. I would find that through the bar. The state has it filed with the state legislative secretary of the state. So that way you can read that stuff. And it helps to read this information from these people. So that way you know what the way that they thought how to put it together, or start figuring how they thought to put this stuff together and to go after them. Because it's like when we went through this in Lincoln County with fluoride, I started filing on them, and then they decided instead of for me to go the direction I was doing, then they decided to try to put it out to the vote. And I was glad that 60% of the people in the county said no, because they were paying attention to not only me, but other people that were speaking out in the county on fluoride. And see, when you start doing this, where the medication are giving away, with some of the medication that they're getting away is poisoning people. Read the side effects on your medication. That's the other point that disturbs me. When these kids are out there committing these crimes, and it's very disturbing when these kids are out committing crimes because they're on psychological drugs that they were given most of their life. And you have to realize that a lot of these kids were given psychological drugs most of their life for the last 25 years. Like ADHD, attention deficit disorder. What the hell is that? That's a mind control game for the corporations. It is so that way they can keep you to have you go to school saying, I'm a stupid dummy. And that's really what it means. I know. They try to classify me that, and I wouldn't accept it. Been there, done it, know the stories. And this is where people need to comprehend how these things work compared to the way they think they work. See, once you start comprehending your public employee standards and system, then you have a standing to start saying yes or no. And the only ones that have the right to say yes or no are you. And you have to know those decisions when you go into these courthouses or public buildings. If you go in for anything in your public building, and remember, building permits are voluntary. That I know for a fact. I've proven that one. I don't go ask permission to do stuff, and neither should you, but you realize that when you do build on your land, you are liable for anything to do it correctly so that way the structure does not fall down or something like that. But that's your responsibility. You can't sit there and have something fall down and then try to blame somebody else for it because, well, I didn't get a permit, so I'm going to sue the city because I didn't get a permit because I wasn't forced to get a permit. And it's like when people do that, that really makes me sick because it's like, people, why are you sitting there doing that type of stuff trying to get a quick buck for what you did wrong or right, and you're trying to come up with another way of making a buck. See, we're not supposed to be doing this to one another. We're supposed to be at least respectful to one another. That would be nice to get back to that, what I grew up in, when I watched, my elders and the way things were going on. I mean, I always appreciated a lot of stuff my elders did. I mean, I grew up in the area, like some of us did, where kids were allowed in the bars, and if you got drunk and stupid, you were thrown out. And that happened to a lot of people. People would go out there, and I've been around with kids that did stupid things. And so when kids do stupid things, they have to be liable. So how they dealt with it back then, you were not allowed back in the bar if you didn't have respect. Because most kids got, always got tossed a soda in there, and so you had to be respectful. And they paid attention to what was going on. They didn't sit there and throw you out to the wolves. Like some people think it's funny today to get people drunk and throw them out to the wolves, when that is ridiculous. It's like, we've lost so much being not honorable to one another that we forgot what it's like to be honorable to not only ourselves but our people around us. So, but anyhow, I just wanted to bring up some thoughts tonight on this. I wish Kawashu would have joined us. That way, because I wanted to bring out some of his cases. He's getting ready to go back for another traveling without a license, and he's already beaten us several times. He already beat his hunting deal, too, hunting without a license, and then they try to bring that back against him again when he's beaten it. And I know, I've read this stuff, been through with him, and so he's still battling it, but he is getting ahead on these things. But this is the one point of putting things together, to sit there and make sure that you've got your act together when you're putting your paperwork in. And you have to do that. You have to make sure that you have your structure together. You have to make sure that you comprehend what you're writing. And I know sometimes it takes a little longer for others to get it. And we all know that one. We all been there until we started figuring things out. And once we started figuring things out, then we got it. And so that is the main point of putting these things together. So, but anyhow, does anybody would like to speak up or anything like that?
Yeah, Ed?
Yeah, go ahead.
You got a little, I just want to do a little clarification.
Floor is yours.
Okay, after the Civil War, the 14th Amendment, when it was passed, and that was what they said is the second Constitution.
Right.
And then 3 years later, after the so-called ratification of the 14th Amendment, then they passed the 1871 Corporation Charter to set everything up so that everyone would be a corporation under the Corporation Charter, and they could process everything through the 14th Amendment, and then to tighten it up later because it wasn't working as good. People were winning cases, and after the wars, World War I and II, the Federal Reserve Act, they needed the Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC, for the Vatican.
Mm-hmm.
So that became the contract law. And if you don't challenge the court jurisdiction, you agree by contract to the venue, the place, and to the jurisdiction of that court. Everything out here practically operates more or less under the 14th Amendment, the Corporation Charter, the Uniform Commercial Code, i.e. the money, the Federal Reserve note, the debt note, and you haven't got it certified yet, how you can extinguish a debt with a debt.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a hard thing, is paying nothing with nothing.
Well, I'm just trying to clarify how make it a little more clear how this sets together.
No problem. No problem.
So everyone is presumed by presumption to be the 14th Amendment slave, and that's why they own the children. You don't have Constitution rights, but under the 14th Amendment, they give the people civil rights.
Hmm.
And that's why when you see murder trials, they jerk the yellow fringe Admiralty maritime flags out of the courts generally.
Yeah.
And they put in lawful flags because it's murder. They're going after. They're prosecuting somebody for murder.
Right.
So it's not a 14th Amendment civil case under the UCC for the Vatican.
Hmm.
Boy, that's the flow. 14th Amendment, they passed the 13th, then the 14th, and then got all that in place. England was smiling from ear to ear. Then they put in the 1871 Charter. They had their foundation for the Charter.
Right.
Under the 14th Amendment. Just like the state of Oregon, if you know, that everything's corporations in Oregon.
Yeah, that is the sad part about our state.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's, page after page of nothing but corporations, tax identification numbers, and their agencies.
Yep.
And the reason the guy down in Arizona or whoever's got his problems with his traveling issue is he should counterclaim whoever issued the citation to him.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to get him to comprehend that compared to I'm going to beat him this way and I'm going to win this way is...
Yeah, he didn't take their job or get some satisfaction out of it.
That's what trying to get him to comprehend.
Well, that's what he's missing anyway.
We're on the same side of that one.
His counterclaim should come first, you see. He's winning the case, but he still needs he can put in all that in the counterclaim.
Well, yeah, and he needs to start going after their jobs instead of being what he's saying, oh, I'm going to be a nice guy because, The
counterclaim goes against the individual that wrote the citation.
Hmm.
That's what my wife did years ago.
Why don't you explain that a little bit more to people?
Well, in a nutshell, my wife got a citation for no license. I didn't sue the organization. I just served the cop the next day that gave her the citation and sued him for $10,000 on a counterclaim. I put affidavits and everything in the counterclaim. Now it's in their system, except the counterclaim was right to naturally do everything under the law, Big L law. And the cop says, when we went to court, on the back of the citation, it says that Dave Brown quit his job and moved to Costa Rica. We found out 7 years later that he was a border patrolman in Texas. So he quit his job and got another job working for the government as a border patrolman in Texas.
And that's standard procedure, pretty much.
But see, he didn't appear in court. He fled the county, the state, and they alleged that he left the whole country. So here the judge is reading what's on the back of the citation that was presented to my wife, that he quit his job and moved to Costa Rica. He wouldn't show up in court. So we couldn't get our $10,000. We couldn't put him up on the witness stand and challenge him on the law, Big L law.
Right.
He was gone.
Yeah, that's not surprising.
Yeah, it was about 3 weeks after she got a citation that he's gone. Leaves the city, the county, and the state.
Yeah, I know. I've seen that before.
But that's what the gentleman needs to do. If he's not, the corporation just sits there. Corporation doesn't do anything. It doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Someone behind the scenes is making the money. It's like all of the IRS taxes, all taxes. Where are they all going? They're going to a corporation.
Mm-hmm.
But when you go back to the original jurisdiction, look at the titles of the court cases. At the top, it was, if you'd done a crime, it was the state of Oregon, ex-rel. Or sometimes I've seen some of them that said the state of Oregon in the name of the people.
Right.
Now it's just corporation called, all capitalized, State of Oregon versus your corporation name. You're the defendant. Well, it's a corporation. It's the plaintiff. And they're saying that you're a corporation. You're incompetent. You're a corporation. You got to have somebody to represent that corporate name, that all capitalized name. That was the object of the 14th Amendment and the object of the 1871. Some call it a constitution, but it's actually a charter. But a charter is a constitution, and a constitution is a charter.
Right.
Understand the 14th Amendment first. It was done and over with. Started 5 years before 1871.
Mm-hmm.
Done, completed, and put in place 3 years before 1871. And now they can start processing everybody under corporation law. It took a few years to get all that in place. Other things had to be put in place. But that's where the corporations, about 20 years later, started coming into play. By 1891, quite a few corporations started getting in play. 40 years later, we had the Federal Reserve Act, 1813, the corporation of the Federal Reserve put in place. Took them 10, 12 years to get that okayed.
Yeah, by themselves.
Yeah, they started on it several times, but the last time they started on it before 1900, and they didn't get it approved until 1913.
Mm-hmm.
And if you got the documents, it says right on there, it's a corporation.
Yep. Yeah, no, that is the one thing.
So they had to get everything in place first. Under the 14th Amendment, you have civil rights. You do not have Constitution rights unless you can come in under the Big L law, Big C citizen. not the little c citizen in the 14th Amendment.
Yeah, and that's the one thing people need to comprehend, the difference.
Yeah, it's so simple, but it's way, it was well done to deceive the people.
Oh, yeah.
That was all I wanted to clarify, was the timeline on
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate that.
the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, and then the 1871 corporate charter. They needed something to work for them. They had to put these pieces together. It was all designed to try to make us all slaves, voluntary slaves, not necessarily mandatory, but voluntary slaves under the 14th Amendment.
And
So they made us corporation slaves with the 14th Amendment and the 1871 Charter.
Mm-hmm.
And they kept passing what they needed to as they went along. The last set of laws was the Uniform Commercial Code when they killed Kennedy.
Yeah, because he was going back to the greenback.
Well, that was half of it. You just haven't studied all the laws that Congress passed in 1963. There's a pile of them, all of them for the UCC. It ain't just one page. It's numerous pages. You can spend days going through all the Uniform Commercial Code laws that were passed by the Congress, the corporate Congress, in 1963.
Well,
A lot of studying.
well, and that's the one thing people don't comprehend, that the Congress is a British agency.
After the 14th Amendment and the corporate charter.
Right.
No different than all of the states becoming corporations.
Mm-hmm. With the bars running everything in the states.
And operating under what? Washington, D.C. And says it shall be called the D.C. Code.
Mm-hmm.
So the Uniform Commercial Code, when you study it out, says it shall be called and shall be known as the D.C. Code. People are jumping over the law.
Mm-hmm.
What law? The corporate laws. How it was done to us. How they took the rights away from the people. Why they're paying all these IRS taxes, state taxes, all these taxes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's the big thing. Is paying taxes, and even when the original constitutions and contracts we have with the British government says that we're supposed to be impugned from them.
Well, I just told you how it was done. It's just all you got to do is research it.
Yep, and we'll get that up for people too, because we want to make sure people get that information. Because that is the whole point, by giving the proper information out there compared to what they got so many people out there going after and not putting real information out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of people don't read this stuff. They get stuff and they just publicize it. They don't read what it means. They don't comprehend stuff.
Well, you got to remember, some of this stuff, you have to understand the jurisdiction of the documents.
Correct.
And it's not easy sometimes to understand how they did it to us. So, that's why I, try to clarify it, that people need to start with what was done to the people through the 14th Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
And we all became slaves with civil rights under the 14th Amendment. That's the presumption, is everyone is a slave.
Yeah.
Rights. That means you can sue and be sued, but you still don't have Constitution rights.
Mm-hmm.
Because nowhere did they ever give the slaves the Constitution rights after the Civil War.
No, they just kept them as slaves, and nobody comprehended that one.
Yeah. They passed a few laws like the 13th Amendment and abolishing slavery, but now it became, under the 14th, voluntary slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for it is they don't have any Constitution rights. That's why Black Man Brock made it so clear in Los Angeles in the 165-page brief that he filed, proving that the 14th Amendment never gave the slaves Constitution rights. And if you don't have Constitution rights, you're still in slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see how this civil rights stuff works. Sometimes it don't work very good when you sue. The presumption is you don't have standing.
Right.
You're just a slave, you know. That presumption is you didn't make it clear that you're not a slave, therefore not a big L law, capital C citizen. Therefore, you don't have standing. How many times have you seen that?
Oh, I've many times in court too where they said that to people.
That's right. Anyway, that's it for now. Let someone else speak, or you can go on. Talk later. Bye.
Yeah, no problem. We appreciate the thoughts on that. And that's the one thing people need to put these things together instead of fight with themselves and fight with their neighbors and stuff on stuff they don't even know because they don't do the research. You know, that is the one thing, is to comprehend what research means and how to use it. Because that's the one thing that the gentleman was bringing up. You have to know your standing, especially when you're going into these courts. And you want it clarified in your standing. And you want them to write it in their standing, if you can get them to write it, or make sure it's in record, so that way at least it's for your record put in the record that is there. So you have to realize that it's up to you to make these things happen, because it ain't going to happen without you doing these instruments. And people say, well, I filed my instruments, it doesn't do any good. Well, the main thing is, how did you file your instrument? How did you write your instrument? Who did you file it with? And you have to know what court you're filing in. That is the other point, is that you have to file what court it is. So that's the one thing, is to know what court you're in. Because there are more than one court system when you go to these courts. To know what court system are you in. Real estate, you know. Civil, you have to know if you're in a Constitution court. You have to know if you're in a corporation court. All these things come up. All these things have bearings. And that's the one thing that I suggest to people, that you've got to make sure you stand up on these things. It's like, you know, the city and counties cannot own property or assets. We know that. This is the one thing that people have got to realize, that they don't have rights to own land. They don't have rights to do these things.
Can I clarify?
Go ahead.
But the corporation has the rights. So the state corporation owns land. The city corporations own land. The county corporations own land. That's it.
Yeah, but technically they're not supposed to own land, but the only way they're getting away with it is because people ain't filing and taking back the structure of our land. People don't know that they're not allowed to own land. It's like, this is like banks. Banks can't own property. Banks can't even own a bank note, technically, if you read federal law, the banking laws. But nobody reads these banking laws. And once people read these banking laws, and you get to know what they mean compared to what you think they mean. Because the banker will always tell you stuff, and people will say, well, the banker said this, or the public servant said this. Well, that's what they said for their job, but what's the truth of the meaning? And that's the one thing that you have to clarify and comprehend, the truth of the meaning of these things. Go ahead. Well, you're claiming to be the injured party, the injured victim with that. So if you're not claiming to be the injured man or woman, you have no standing. Because who did they injure? Right. Well, yeah, you have to put the corpus delicti in the structure for it even to be admissible in court. Right, or yes, and you want to make sure that you have the evidence so that way it's not just hearsay. Does that make sense? So, hey, the floor is open. Go ahead.
Yeah, Ed, a couple of questions. All right, piggybacking off of what Links just said. So then maybe I should update that instrument that I typed up and add that to where my daughter, where it would say the child that's going to get vaccinated, I should put in parentheses corpus delicti, since she will be the injured party?
Yes. But don't
And
put
also,
it in parentheses. Just put corpus, she is the corpus delicti.
Okay. And then also, we're, just to go over it again, just to be reminded, and instead of, I think you said, instead of putting where it says plaintiff, you're going to want to put corpus delicti in its place.
Well, yeah, you always put that the injured man or woman, corpus delicti.
All right, and then just last thing, I got in kind of late, but I caught something about, you said something about corporations cannot have lawyers, and I already know about the bar card. It's the bar card is nothing but like a Sam's Club card, whoop-de-doo. But you were saying that the corporations are not allowed to have lawyers.
Commissioners, public servants are not allowed to have lawyers. And I don't know the ORS in your state, but I do know it here in my state.
The ORS?
Well, it's Oregon Revised Statute, but in your state it has that in the, it should have it in the structure, and I'll send you how it looks into mine here in just a second.
Okay.
So that way you can see what I'm referring to. Because in the state of Oregon here, it clearly states powers and duties, where it says here under ORS 180.220, powers and duties the Department of Justice shall have, And it says in number 2, no state officer, board, commissioner, or head of any department or institution of the state shall employ or be representative by any counsel or attorney at law. And your state should have something similar. I'll send you this with the way it looks, so this way you can see what I'm referring to. But you want to make sure that you look for your state too, because every state, to the best of my knowledge, has this. And so you want to be able to go by what your state says, if you can find it, because I know that they should have it. And I haven't, I got another guy over in Texas, over in that area. He might know it too, but I'll ask him when I do talk to him. But I'm going to put this up here for you to, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm sending you ours, not yours. You know what I mean?
Yes, Ed.
So, but yeah, no public officials are supposed to have representation. They're supposed to be in a tribunal court standing on their own 2 feet. And that's the one thing, trying to get that through people's comprehension, is trying to get them so that way they comprehend this point. It's like we go through all this stuff. They come up like with new math, and they come up with all this new stuff for the kids, and it's not doing anything for we the people, and it's not even doing anything for the kids. It's mind messing the kids up. You know, so I mean, they don't even know what's real and truth anymore, the kids. A lot of the kids don't get it. They just don't comprehend the truth of what's going on around them. It's like the one thing is like when Obama was in office, all of his executive orders benefited him and his friends. And people knew that. And most of the senators wouldn't stand up. They wouldn't correct the issues, wouldn't correct the problems, because most of them were getting a percentage off. And it's like the one thing people need to realize and wake up, that your cities and states do everything for, like a preaching, you know, everything for themselves. And if you know, and if you do the research on your court systems in your counties, you'll find out that the jails are owned by the judges, the attorneys, lawyers, and the big businessmen and women of your community own the jails. So they make an investment on this for damages for themselves. They use the damage to you for their personal financial gain. And that's where it sort of interests me when people go, oh, well, you know, evil and good. Well, you know, I don't buy the deal where God put in the devil, so that way we have something to fight and argue about. You figure God wouldn't put his people through that type of frustration, humiliation, and anger. So, I mean, that's where I have my difficulties thinking on some things where people go off on the way they bring up things like that. But, yeah, I don't know what it is in your area. I know that there is a federal law that I have that was decided in a court system, and I think that was in 1964 after the administrative rule went through, and I'll have to try to eventually find that one. Because if I can find out, I'll give it to you. Go ahead.
Some of the states operate under codes. Like we have ORS in Oregon. In Idaho, for instance, it's Idaho Code. So this state might operate off of a code.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, I'm not sure on his. I think his does. But it's been a while since I've read his state charter and stuff. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, okay. All right, let me see what she put up at. What was her question? Let's see that. Well, is she on with us or not? Oh, okay. Well, go ahead. The floor is open to you.
May I?
Go ahead.
Yes, I have a question that I'm trying to file a claim against a few city officials.
Speak up, area.
Yes, I'm trying to file a claim against a few city officials, but what I noticed is that there's a statute of limitation where it's time barred within a 6-month period.
I can still barely hear you.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Talk a little closer to the phone, I guess. I'm trying to figure out why you're not coming in clear.
Yes. Any better?
A little bit better. Go ahead.
Yes. I have a question. I'm trying to move a claim against 3 city officials, but the problem is that there's a time bar of 6 months, and I did not put in a notice. Can I still move a court case against them?
Did you comprehend the question?
Yes. Employees. Yes. There's a 6-month bar on making claims. I was wondering if I still could move a claim against them in their individual capacity.
Well, yeah, but he has to prove the case was fraudulent. You have to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt, if I'm comprehending the thought here. You have to prove it was fraudulent from the beginning.
The case is basically up on a traffic stop, and my automobile was end up towed and all that. Based upon reading the police department directives, once a citation is issued, then it is regarded as an arrest, and for like offenses like summary offense, those are regarded as non-arrestable offenses. So I wanted to go after them under that heading of false arrest.
So I comprehend that was dealing with a traffic stop?
Yes.
And what was the traffic stop about that you were allegedly convicted on?
I wasn't convicted. It was dismissed. But it was on a license and expired inspection stickers.
It was dismissed and what?
Yeah, it was dismissed, and I'm trying to go after them for false arrest for the incident.
Oh, it was dismissed. I'm trying to. Did you comprehend the other part there?
The state case was dismissed. In February. So what I'm trying to do is going after the 3 officers who participated in the incident for false arrest.
Are you comprehending what he's saying there? I can barely hear him.
I'm comprehending quite a bit of it. Plus, the chat in YouTube is my question for this in this living man here is, are you a lawful bloodline American? Are you at least
No, I'm not.
fifth generation American?
What do you describe as fifth generation
Was your
American?
great great grandfather or grandmother an American?
I'm not even sure.
Wait.
Well, in that case, I'm looking at you're trying to go after him with the Constitution, but until you're fifth generation American, you are a citizen and not a lawful bloodline American. Therefore, you've got the privileges that they can take away at any time, because that's what the way the Constitution was set up. But whenever you're fifth generation or more, you go by the Constitution and you have rights. But
Okay.
if you want, Ed, it's Cheyenne can give you the information.
I think I see what property was taken.
Automobile.
So, did you ever file grant if they dismissed the cases? Have you ever filed going after them for grand theft auto?
No, I never. It was dismissed just February. It was a long, like about 6 month battle, 3 times in court, and this was finally dismissed in February of this year.
So it was dismissed in February, but they took your your vehicle then, or covered wagon.
Yeah, they took it, and I had to pay the money to get it back out of impound and all that.
So you paid the money, you got it back, and you want to go after the recuperate the loss of funds, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So the one thing is that you still need to put in a grand theft auto report claim that they stole your vehicle, seeing that it was dismissed too. That they stole your vehicle, that's property theft.
Okay.
And you want to be able to get that filed. Because they are liable for property theft.
Right.
Yeah, and I got information on that one, but do you have my email by any chance?
I am in frequent contact with Johnny, so I don't know if I could get it from her.
I still could barely hear them.
No, I don't have the email address.
Okay, are you on Facebook with us?
No, I'm not currently on Facebook.
Okay. He's on the phone system. Could you you got his phone number, right?
It's right there. I've got it, and it's not a problem.
Okay. You get his number down. We'll give you a call back. We'll get some information from you, and then we'll get. I'll give you my email, and we'll start getting some other stuff for you out there that might be able to help you out.
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
All right, thanks a lot.
So, because I don't like giving out too much of my information over public channels, because I'm already out there enough as it is. You are familiar with our website, new.Oregon Trackers, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay. So, and then we have a transportation issue up there. I don't know if we have those court cases up there yet or not, but I'll get that. But we need to discuss a plan of how to do that. Which state are you in?
PA.
Okay. So we'll have to give you some, get the number, and I will give you a call back, and we'll get that together to get you helped out here. And so we'll see what we can come up and throw some thoughts for you to help out on your situation. But we are not attorneys, we are not lawyers, we're just nobodies. You know. Okay.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
So anyhow, I got that. So anyhow, like I said, I'll give you a call here after a bit, so we can tie up. So then that way you get that.
All right, thanks a lot.
Yeah, we want to make sure you get the information because it needs to be out there for everybody. Because everybody, we just got to make sure everybody's educated, lawful or legal, because it is the bloodline that actually matters of who does what with their bloodline and how they're protecting their assets. And for your bloodline, too, because you could always set up things for your bloodline down the road, too.
Okay.
People don't take in consideration of that thought. So, all right. So we got that one going. I'll get that information to you. We got any other ones that like to bring up anything? Any other questions at this point? Guess not. All right, so I'll give you a call back here in a little bit. So if we don't have any other thoughts right now, what I guess we could do is just call it an evening tonight. And I'll get a hold of you here in a little bit. And so I guess we'll call it an evening, and we'll go from there. And we'll bring up the stuff so that way we have it next week next week on some other stuff on this stuff. So I have to do my homework up and bring some other stuff forward on it, on your questions, so we can bring that up next week. So anyhow, if we have nothing else, I'm going to go ahead and basically, I think it's time we just call it an evening, and we'll get ready for tomorrow night, because tomorrow night we're going to go over taxes and property taxes again. Because I want to nail this, because I'm doing my research too to start getting my filings done, and so I want to make sure everybody else gets theirs done at the same time. So, or whenever they need it. But anyhow, so seeing that we got that one going and answered, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up for tonight. Call it a night. Seeing that there's no other pending ones, so. With that, I'm going to say, may the Great Spirit bless you, may Mother Earth provide for you, and may the Creator continue to bless you.
Thank you for listening to Disclaimers by Ed Johnston. It is March 24th, 2018, and again, we are not lawyers, attorneys, or any professional capacity in any of that way. We are just living men and women who have studied, learned, and we are giving out information. You use it how you see fit, and you are liable for your actions. We are not liable for your actions. Thank you again, and good night. And evidently Ed is washing his hands. Hopefully that's it.